Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to a very special Saturday episode. We are coming to you, as always, from the greatest country in the world, the great Republic of Texas, deep in the heart of the Lone Star State, Dallas, Texas, to be more specific. If you guys aren't already a subscriber, please consider hitting that subscribe button for us. Maybe even hitting that like button as well. It really helps out with the algorithm here. Also, don't forget to hit the bell icon so you guys don't miss an upcoming episode, whether I go live or not. We'll be putting out recorded episodes as well. I was actually going to be doing this episode as a recorded episode and not actually go live, but I figured, what the heck? I had some time between laundry and all kinds of other home stuff. So here we are, going live for you guys. As always, if you guys are on the go, you can find us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, as well as iHeartRadio and Amazon Music at Truth Defender Podcast. If you guys love what we do on the show and you're feeling generous, consider sharing the show with a friend, family member, or colleague. That'll really help us out as well. Questions for myself or our guests, as well as guest or topic recommendations, you guys can always shoot them over to thetruthDefender1776 at gmail.com. Links to all our social media as well will be in the show notes after this is done. Actually, I think it's already there. Twitter, GETTR, Instagram, Facebook, Rumble, all that kind of stuff. We do have two Instagram accounts. One of them is at Truth Defender Podcast, and then the other one is at Defender Podcast. The main show Instagram is for upcoming shows and promos and that kind of stuff. And the other one is just me posting a bunch of just random stuff that I find throughout the world. So that's pretty good to stop by and check that out as well. I have everything linked down below, like I mentioned. I wanted to hop on today, Saturday afternoon, just to kind of talk a little bit about what's going to be happening on Monday. So obviously everybody knows that Monday is the solar eclipse. We'll all be looking forward to that. It's like a big thing. Although I do believe that the eclipse is just more distraction than anything, like a lot of stuff that's been going on lately that we'll be talking about as well. I do think it's interesting to kind of dig a little bit deeper into what those events are and, just kind of the ins and outs of them. So the solar eclipse is going to be one of them. I want to start actually with obviously what happened, I think, a few weeks ago. So everybody knows that the giant cargo ship that crashed into the Baltimore bridge happened, right? That was like a few weeks ago, I think. It was like a huge tragedy. A lot of people, not a lot of people, I guess some construction workers that were on the bridge while it happened lost their lives. Some of the crew that were on the ship as well died, which is very tragic as well. The entire bridge came down, which sucks. So that's Francis Scott Key Bridge. I always forget the name of that. And it's kind of odd considering that it's not the first cargo ship to have crashed into a port this year or even like within the last year. Apparently, this is like a huge thing that happens all the time, which is odd because you never hear about it. Obviously, this is the first like major one that I heard about, and I guess that's mostly because a lot of people died. Obviously, one person is way too many, but there was a handful of people that died in this instance. Also, I was looking through a lot of the articles and stuff. Apparently, now they found that there's hazardous chemicals leaking into the river, so that's another great thing. It's not one thing; it's the other. Obviously, what happened with the whole train derailments, and they had hazardous materials as well on those seeping into the grounds. But now we have it, you know, unloading into the rivers and stuff like that. So uh, it's rough, right? And there's a whole lot going on when it comes to the bridge and as far as like rebuilding the bridge and who's responsible for like insurance and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, cargo container ships have their own insurance. The bridge was insured as well. But now we're seeing things like the Biden administration pushing for bills to get the bridge funded, right? Now I understand the need and the want to help, But I don't know, putting up bills, which I'm sure are only going to be stacked with other nonsense like funding for other countries and all kinds of stuff. They never cease to like amaze me at how well they use tragedies to kind of line their pockets for other things. They're going to use this as a way to get more funding, whatever for whatever they want to put in there. They're going to save funding for the bridge, which I think at first glance was like $400 million is what they were wanting to push for first. I'm sure they're going to stuff the bill with a whole bunch of other stuff. I don't like to get too much into politics. I do follow politics a lot, and I do have my own beliefs and the way I think, but I don't like to put that into the show because it's not what we do here. But um, based off of kind of what we've seen over the past couple of years, and pretty much basically what we see every year, and that's been going on for decades. Wherever the party is in charge, puts bills up to be voted on. They cram them with a bunch of other of their pet projects where they want funding for whatever else, and then they try to push it through. Now, when the opposite party declines or they vote it down, they then use that during election season as a way of like a gotcha kind of moment, right? So let's say the Biden administration wants to put this bill up, $400 million for the rebuild. They stuff it with whatever kind of nonsense they have in there, whether it be funding for Ukraine or whatever's going on. They put it for a vote. Republicans vote it down, and then the Democrats can turn around and say, "You see, these people don't care about Baltimore. They don't care about you people there, and you should vote for us because we care about it because we put it up for a vote, right?" When that's not actually what they were voting on. They were voting on shutting down everything else that was in there, whether it was funding for Ukraine or whatever else was going on. That was what was going on, like on the background, right? So I feel like this might get shot down, and when they do shoot it down, it's going to turn into a whole another thing about you see, like we care more about you guys than the Republicans do, or whatever's going on. Um, and that's going to be an issue, right? It's going to be another talking point. It's going to be another way of getting um, voters in that area to continue voting Democrat. Obviously, now that can go either way. If the Republicans were in office at this time, it would be the exact same thing. So I don't hold out for any, which party. I don't really care. It's all nonsense, and they all vote against you no matter what. Looking to line their own pockets and all that kind of stuff. Whether you believe that happens on a grand scale or not, what's been going on lately with the Democrat Party has been happening for decades, right? It goes whichever, like I said, whichever party's in office at the time. But we've never seen this kind of obvious in your face kind of money laundering is what I'll call it. We haven't seen it so in your face like we're seeing it now, right? It's getting very obvious if you kind of look at money being laundered through Ukraine. Uh, those bills pass. Um, the monies get sent to weapons manufacturers and the military industrial complex. And then that money's given right back, to politicians just to have them vote whichever way they want on certain bills. And when I say they, I do mean military industrial complex, which controls most of what goes on within the world, wars, weapons sales, money laundering. And then I also talk about politicians, congressmen that are lobbied against, right, by big pharma and stuff like that to vote on certain bills. There's no incentive right now to stop that money from flowing in. So when I say they, that's like a whole part of the government. Obviously, there's little factions within, um, but most of the time, it's the people that are voting for these bills. That's the they. Um, so it's rough. And as long as politics has money in it and there's lobbying against certain people, and you might as well have. We should like make Congress like NASCAR, where you have all the sponsors on jackets and stuff like that, like so that way like who's bought out by who, right? Um, It's wild that Nancy Pelosi's like her husband is like the greatest day trader the world's ever seen. That guy hits on every single stock that he picks. He's like 1,000 times better than any stock trader ever like that the world's ever seen. Her son also just got off on his 7th. Kind of they were trying to indict him for insider trading again for like the 7th time. And once again, he's off scot free, right? So they obviously know that something's going on. He's been up 7 times and he keeps getting off free. I wonder why, like how does that happen? We all know how that happens, but like, that's how you know that. I think there's even an app. There's an app. There's a website also that I also look at. It tracks all the trades for each congressman. Like every trade that they make throughout the year, it tracks them, how much money they make, how much they invest, all that kind of stuff. So if you ever like want to get into day trading, I think there's an app for it that alerts you whenever one of the congressmen or women makes a trade, it alerts you to what they were trading and how much and all that stuff, so you can actually copy their pick. So that's a great. I forgot what the name of the app is. I have it downloaded somewhere. So I mean, if you want to learn how to day trade, you don't really have to learn. You can just kind of copy what they're doing and hopefully make some money. But um, yeah, there was even like a page on Twitter, prior X now, that was following like all their trades and stuff. So we all know what's happening. I'm sure obviously the people in charge know it's happening, but they're not going to do anything. I mean, how are you going to take down Nancy Pelosi, who's like the third person? She's 2 people away from the presidency, I think, right? So, I mean, how are you going to arrest her or anybody with their family? So it's not odd. It's just infuriating that it's allowed to happen and nobody really cares. I mean, we all care, right? But no, we don't do anything. Like, yeah, I care, and a lot of people other care that this kind of stuff's happening, but like, you know, nothing ever happens. So even within law enforcement, whenever they try to bring something up, investigators die, or like the lead investigator gets told to shut it down, or they get fired, or So what are you supposed to do? Um, but yeah, I mean, keeping on the same theme here when it comes to cargo ships and stuff like that. Baltimore wasn't the latest one. It was the latest one this year, but there was also another one that was happening in Turkey around the same time. And I'll read this, comes from the tradewinds.news.com. Um, so there was video footage of a large vessel in Kayseri port in Turkey. Yangming marine container, I'm assuming that's coming from China, um, crashed into one of the ports and knocked over like those giant cranes they have on the port. Um, it crashed into the port. I don't know. Obviously, they probably shut the port down, but it's hopefully back up now. I'll have the link to the article down below. They have a video on YouTube as well that you guys can look at. It shows the giant cargo ship just crashing in the port, knocking down cranes. I think there was some people that died as well. Yeah, and I think that was coming from Canada all the way to Turkey. Um, it's wild. I mean, it's not the first time, right? So you see these cargo ships crashing. You see giant farms catching on fire. You see food packaging plants catching on fire. You see China. You see Bill Gates, and then buying up farmland within the United States. Um, like, why, right? I mean, if there's something going on, all these food processing plants and packaging plants catching on fire, giant farms with cows of like 30,000 heads of cattle catching on fire and all the cows die, right? Um, in Europe, I think the farmers that were protesting in Europe, they actually won out against the government. I think that was in was that Holland or something like that, Switzerland. I don't remember exactly which country it was, but those were the people that were like throwing manure on their Congress and all that kind of stuff. So they were actually fighting back and protesting, and they actually won out. So the government reversed all of that kind of stuff that they were trying to do, as far as having them try to kill cattle and making seed more expensive and making it more expensive for them to you know, raise cattle and sell them off for food and chickens and eggs and all that kind of stuff. So it's like a weird push at the moment, attacking food and having foreign agents actually buy up land in the United States, which is wild. We claim that China is like our biggest threat, right? But we allow them to buy up farmland within the United States. A lot of the tolls that run through a lot of the major cities are owned by Chinese companies or people that come from China, stuff like that. So, like, they're our biggest enemy, but we feed them money, like billions of dollars every year. We allow them to come in and steal sensitive material and like R&D work and all that kind of stuff, right? Like everything that China has comes from us. Like they steal it. They bribe a lot of people within these major companies. They bribe a lot of our military service men and women. When it comes to top secret stuff, like they pay them a lot of money for them to give up secrets about nuclear reactors and submarines and weapons and stuff like that. So it happens all the time. You never see it on the news, obviously, but uh, that stuff does happen. It's wild. They're our biggest enemies, and yeah, it's like we're helping them. We're helping them take us over. It's like a weird thing. um, yeah, I don't know, but yeah. So the federal bill, Biden is talking about wants us to put a bill up for Congress to approve to fund the rebuild. Then they also talk about how the rebuild is going to take about 10 years. Now, is this one initial bill, like round of funding for the bridge rebuild, or are we gonna like put bills out every year to add more money to it, add more money to it? I'm sure this is gonna be used as another tactic to say like, oh, we're creating jobs in this area, which is wild that you would take advantage of a catastrophe so big and then spin it into like, oh, we're creating jobs in the area. It's like, what? You know, how does that work? So yeah, so Biden pledges federal dollars for entire cost to rebuild collapsed Baltimore Bridge. I'll just read off a little bit here from the MarylandMatters.org. President Biden called Tuesday for the federal government to foot the bill to rebuild the Francis Scott Key Bridge outside Baltimore following its collapse earlier that day. That was March 26th, right? The ongoing search and rescue operation led by the Coast Guard is top priority. So apparently, there's like 4 or 5 people that are still unaccounted for, or maybe more. Someone's gonna have to correct me on that, but they had started to cut parts of the bridge out, removing it from the water, trying to open temporary passageways to allow ships to come and go. Obviously, there's probably ships that are stuck within the port still, and other ships that were waiting to get in. I think yeah. So they're looking to open up temporary channels. So since ships remain stuck within the port of Baltimore after the Francis Scott Bridge collapsed, and at least 10 ships are waiting to enter, according to marine traffic data. Um, yeah, so it's rough, right? So they obviously it's not just the bridge for people to get back and forth, but cargo ships to get into the area as well. Um, I'm not exactly sure what the port. Oh, okay. So it says the port has become increasingly important to U.S. retailers and manufacturers seeking the diversity the supply networks bring goods closer to customers. It is the busiest U.S. port for car shipment, handling more than 750,000 vehicles in 2023, and handles imports and exports for major automakers. So it's obviously the auto industry. It would have probably been a lot worse if it was importing. I'm sure it does on some level, but if it was like a major port for supplies like food and all that kind of stuff, supply lines, and that would be like a major deal. It's still bad, but cars, maybe they're not electric cars and they're trying to stop it. That would make sense. Uh, it's wild, but we're gonna have to wait and see. I don't know when exactly the bill is gonna be put up for a vote, but they saying that they're wanting to do it. So $400 million at the first go around could take up to 10 years to build, which makes no sense. the Empire State Building was built in like 14 months, start to finish, right? That cargo ship, obviously, they're not trying to rebuild the ship, whatever, but I don't think that bridge was bigger than the Empire State Building, long laying on its side. Probably not. Uh, I don't know what goes into bridge construction and how that works. I'm sure there's a lot going on underneath the water as well, so it's probably a little more advanced. But I mean, back in the day when the Empire State Building was built, technology wasn't that great, right? And they had guys up there with no harnesses and ropes building the Empire State Building in 14 months. That's wild. So shouldn't be taking 10 years. Definitely not. But I smell something fishy there. We'll see what happens. It's gonna be a weird one to follow. Um, yeah. Switching topics here. Uh, let's hop into Monday. So Monday, April 8th. Everybody knows that the solar eclipse is going to be happening. Um, uh, so I don't remember. I was reading somewhere. I think the last one would happen like in the 70s or something like that. On this scale, would happen on April 8th. Now I see a lot of weird coincidences happening with the date April 8th. Um, a lot of recent stuff. I don't. I tried looking back in time, over history, just to kind of see if there's any kind of correlation with the date, if there's anything meaningful. I didn't see anything that popped out that's too major. A few things that I will bring up. Um, April 8th, everybody's favorite particle accelerator will be coming back online on April 8th. So CERN is going to be coming back online, uh, looking to smash protons together again on April 8th to search for invisible particles secretly powering our universe. I don't know if that has any kind of correlation with the solar eclipse or they're just that was a random date that they picked out, but I don't think a lot of stuff is random and there might be something going on. So it says here in this article that comes from Daily Mail, I'll have this linked as well. The world's largest and most powerful particle accelerator is set to smash protons together on April 8th to search for invisible particles secretly powering our universe. Theories have suggested there are 17 different particle groups, and the European Organization of Nuclear Research, better known as CERN, confirmed the existence of one using its Large Hadron Collider in 2012. So that's coming back online. The last time that it was operational, I think that was 2012, right? Was the last time it kind of was fired up. I could be wrong on that. I don't. For some reason, 2012 sticks out to me. Uh, but it went live in 2008 in Switzerland. There's a lot of theories that the last time that Large Hadron Collider powered up, we kind of slipped into another kind of plane of existence, which was kind of throwing everything off. So I don't know what the correlation is between the solar eclipse. It's definitely interesting. Uh, see, it says on April 8th, the team will send the beams through the tunnel where they will collide. The teams will be on the hunt for dark matter, which makes up around 28% of our massive universe. Yeah, I don't like it. That's all I can say. It's gonna be weird. I don't know. That's the first one. So I don't know uh, why or what the big deal is here, but it's definitely going online. And I've been trying to read articles about it, maybe just kind of see what the whole reason was for coming online now. But it's like they were looking for the God particle last time and all that kind of stuff when they claimed that they found it. We're definitely in for another crazy ride. On the same note, we switch back over to NASA. NASA is also going to be launching 3 rockets during the solar eclipse on April 8th. Um, that's going to be coming from NASA's Wallops Flight Facility in Virginia. Now, the atmospheric perturbations around eclipse path, which the acronym is APEP, APEP, and hold on to that because that's significant as well. Um, the rockets will be launched at three different times: 45 minutes before the eclipse, one during the eclipse, and one 45 minutes after the peak. Uh, these intervals are important to collect data on how the sudden disappearance affects that ionosphere, right? Um, Now I say right, like I know, you know, that's to be true, but creating disturbances that have the potential to interfere with our communications. Launches will be live streamed on Wallup's YouTube beginning at 2:30, so you guys can actually watch those rockets go up before, during, and after the eclipse. Um, Now, I say hold on to that because that's important. Now, APEP, which stood for here in the article, the atmospheric perturbations around eclipse path, probably just made up. Um, APEP, right? So APEP, also known as Apep or Apovis, was an ancient Egyptian deity who embodied darkness and disorder and was the enemy of light and Ma'at. He was a serpent demon who represented the forces of chaos, death, and disorder, and was the mortal enemy of order personified as the goddess Ma'at and light as incarnated in the form of Ra. The sun was Ra's great barge, which sailed through the sky from dawn to dusk and then descended into the underworld. As it sailed through the darkness, it was attacked by Apep, who sought to kill Ra and prevent sunrise. Apep was defeated daily by Ra and those aboard his solar barge on his journey through Duat. So I just find it weird, right? So Apep also is like the destroyer, the eater of the suns. That's another name for it. Um, so whether I highly doubt that that name was just like a random name that happened to coincide. They obviously knew that this was, some kind of deity back in time, and they named it after it. So uh, it's it's odd, right? So like, I'm trying to look at. We can find any kind of information as far as the, I guess, legend or story of it. No, it's obviously Egyptian. These are like gods and that they used to worship back in the day. Uh, but it's definitely crazy that they would decide to just create an entire program named around that. Those names don't just come like out of nowhere. And like I said, I doubt that they created a name for it and then they were just like, oh yeah, well it matches up perfectly with this legend, and we'll just go ahead and add it to it. So um, that's the other big one, right? So along the lines of that kind of stuff, like I mentioned, looking at the information that I have here, let me pull this up as well. I had some few things here. Let me pull up on my end. Okay, so we're gonna go back into the April 8th date. No, that's not me. I have so many passwords on my computer, it's ridiculous. Oh, I had everything up and running, but I don't. Do, 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 do. All right. Now, let's take a look at this. Sorry, let me just try to pull up this information here. So, another thing to look at when it comes to the April 8th date, like I mentioned, I didn't see any kind of correlation throughout history with the April 8th date. There was nothing like significant about that date in past, like in history. The only other thing that I saw regarding this was related to Aleister Crowley. If anybody knows who Aleister Crowley is, he was an occultist, devil worshiper, and all that kind of stuff. There was a reported case that Aleister Crowley reported hearing voices, and a voice that came from a being called AOS, AIWASS, on April 8th, 9th, and 10th in 1904. Uh, Crowley believed the voice came from a non corporeal being and that it dictated the book of the Law of Liber to him while he was on honeymoon in Cairo. I didn't look into the book all that much because apparently that was the book that he had that he created. That was it was just odd that that entire kind of story came up from him at that point, on the 8th as well. Could be nothing, could be something, I don't know. Just found it interesting that that was correlated with the same date. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens on the 8th. Um, when it comes to these kind of missiles that they're or rockets that they're shooting up from NASA, they want to try and test, what the effects are like. To me, it sounds like EMP kind of stuff. Um, Trying to test whether it affects electrical grids and infrastructure and stuff like that here on Earth. It won't take much. I know if you live in California, I understand that the electrical grid is completely crap and rolling brownouts and blackouts and all that kind of stuff. Often here in Texas, we had that thing as well when the electricity went out, especially during that time during the storm when it snowed like crazy. I think it was a few years ago. Um, Electrical grids and all that kind of stuff are usually on the verge of melting down, especially during the summer here. We always get notices from the electrical companies throughout the week to like minimize use and put your thermostat on 72 or 73. But when it's like 105, 106 outside, it's not going to fly. Sorry about that. So, uh, it's wild. Um, I think that might be something kind of related. I, Hopefully it's just tests and they're not actually trying to create chaos on their end as well. But we'll see. I'll be looking closely. I'll be watching closely on that day, Monday. I'm looking forward to the eclipse and seeing what's going to happen. So I don't know. I just found those interesting. These are all things that were kind of on the same date. So CERN is something to look out for. NASA as well with the rockets. Uh, it's very interesting. I'll be watching both. So I know the Rockets have that live stream on YouTube. I don't know of any kind of live stream or what they post on the website for CERN. They do post like videos and stuff, but I haven't seen anything leading up to this one. Just a bunch of announcements that it's going to be going live, hopefully on the 8th. Now, whether they do that on the 8th or not, who knows? But that's kind of what they've been recording and getting ready to do. So who knows? We might slip into some other kind of portal or time on another kind of plane of existence or something. So it's getting crazy. This year's definitely getting crazy. An election year for most of the world, not just here in the U.S. So um, a lot of things shaking and moving. There's also, speaking of shaking and moving, uh, right? Yeah, it's definitely gonna be. Oh, what was that right here? There we go. Sorry about that. It's definitely gonna be a busy Monday. Mondays are usually crappy as it is, so go figure. Just one more thing to it. Um, Yeah. So we'll be looking out for it. We'll see what's going on. So let's go ahead and pivot here as well. I want to talk about the next one here. Jesus, how many of these do I have? Right. So obviously the entire world went to shit during COVID. As far as lockdowns and people being stuck in their houses, and a lot of people that were fired from their jobs for not wanting to get vaccines, and just a lot of craziness that was going on. Um, Around the world. Not too much here, like where I live. We had the initial kind of lockdown, a little bit of the initial kind of fear gripping the area as well, but we quickly like opened back up. So it was kind of like Nothing ever really happened here. Streets were still empty and all that kind of stuff, which was like the eeriest thing in the world. I remember driving down the freeway, like right in the middle of the entire thing, and like there was nobody on the street, nobody on the freeways, nobody walking on the roads. There's nobody outside. Everything was like shut down. Everybody was locked in, which was weird because we opened up around here pretty quickly. So that was all just everybody doing that on their own. So, um, but a lot of our government watched what was going on during that time, and they saw how people kind of conformed and caved in to mandates and things that they were wanting to implement. People got vaccines, and they're now on their like 12th, 13th boosters. And uh, if you guys were on social media like everybody else was during that time, the shaming was like ridiculous. You'd see people online posting pictures. Remember that the whole time when like Krispy Kreme was giving out free donuts for getting your vaccines and like your boosters and stuff? That was wild, right? So there's nothing crazier than like being angry at people for not doing the right thing, like being healthy and taking care of their body by getting the shot, than giving free donuts out to people, making them less healthy, you know, for getting the shot. It's like a weird kind of spin on the whole thing. Um, I remember that pretty vividly, which is crazy. But people in charge were seeing that kind of stuff, and they were seeing, just kind of how much they could get away with over time. Obviously, the World Health Organization is the one responsible for putting up kind of guidelines as for countries to follow on on like international health issues, right? So obviously, COVID was worldwide. A lot of people died. I don't think the numbers were as crazy as they were saying they were, but nonetheless, one is a lot. If it's a couple 100,000, that's way too much, obviously. Um, but the WHO had a lot of rules and regulations in charge that they popped up around 2021, 2022. A lot of regulations, and um, they were they're actively trying to get adjusted at this time. So I'll kind of read through. If you guys want to follow along, I'll have the link to the website. The website is stopthewho.org, and it leads you to another website that's called worldcouncilforhealth.org. So for a little background, the International Health Regulations was adopted by 194 member states of the World Health Organization in 2005. They enable the WHO to declare, that's the big one right there. These regulations enable the WHO to declare a public health emergency of international concern. So the World Health Organization has been giving free reign to all these different countries, and all these countries kind of sign over their rights and like decision making over to the WHO, saying that they're able to declare public emergencies when it comes to health. Them alone, regardless of whatever their constitution is or if they even have one, their rules of sovereignty or any kind of stuff like that. The WHO overrides all of that, right, for all these countries whenever there's a world health emergency. So that in itself is like extremely dangerous. Um, so it says it decides they enable the WHO to declare a public health emergency of international concern if it decides that an infectious disease outbreak has occurred in a member state, but with the consent of the member state, which the consent is handed over. So they put it up for a vote. They don't like come in and overtake countries and make them do it. They all sit down like at a meeting, and they say, this is what we would consider like public health. And if there's any kind of emergency, you guys give us the power to come in and declare it an emergency. And each country has to sign off on it, right? So it's a conscious decision that they're doing. They sign over all the rights of everybody that lives in that country, and saying the who's not responsible for you. If they declare some kind of emergency, like we have to follow what they say. So it's not like they're like overtaking countries, right? But it's up to each country as well to decide whether they want to not go along with it. So I think the next one they have, because they want to update what is considered an emergency, right? So they want to make all these adjustments to all the rules that they have in place. And it's never to take away power. They never want to limit like all the power they have. They never want to get rid of anything that they already have in place. They want to expand it. So they want to expand what they would consider a public emergency or public health emergency. Now, it's I don't see anything that's listed currently in the adjustments that they want to make, but I'm sure that somewhere down the line they're going to have like mass shootings and things like that when it comes to like the Second Amendment or any country that allows their citizens to have guns. That's going to be declared a public health emergency, because obviously mass shootings affects everybody and gun crime affects everybody as well. Those things will be listed as public health emergencies as well. So whenever the WHO decides like they just want to go off and declare some kind of emergency, there's nothing you can do. If your country's already approved it and they've signed over their sovereignty over to the WHO at that time. Once they declare it a public health emergency, like they can come in and try to take away guns and confiscate, all that kind of stuff. Now, in a country like the US, I wouldn't say we're divided 50-50 on the whole Second Amendment kind of thing, but for the most part, pro Second Amendment states might might outweigh states that don't like the Second Amendment, right? So I think there's more gun lovers in the country than there is people that hate them. And when I say gun lovers, I mean like legal, law-abiding gun owners, right? And like here in Texas now, we're constitutional carry, but prior to that, you had to have a license to own a weapon, and I had my gun license way before, like years before we went constitutional carry, and I still continue to maintain my gun license now, even though we don't need it. But I renew it all the time, every 5 years, take the courses and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's important, even though we have constitutional carry. I think you still need to be going into those gun classes, learning how to use them properly. When the flight or fight kicks in, a lot of weird stuff happens as far as like trigger manipulation and your nerves and adrenaline's pumping and stuff like that. You need to learn how to control that kind of stuff. So um, I think we need to get people trained up on how to use weapons. If you have kids and you have weapons in the house, you know, teach them that these are not just toys and they're extremely dangerous. Get them learning how to shoot as fast as you can the proper way. Um, Practice, practice, practice. You want to keep everybody informed. Just because constitutional carry is in place and you're allowed to have a weapon doesn't mean you should have one if you don't know how to use it. So um, it's very important that we get people, you know, learning how to use them and not just purchasing one because you can. So very important. You don't want to shoot somebody on accident when you're trying to help them. So, um, but yeah, things like this. So we'll look at a couple of things here to kind of understand. January 18th, 2022, the United States Department of Health and Human Services proposed amendments to the IHR, which is the International Health Regulations, IHR. These amendments give control over the declaration of a public health emergency in any member state to the WHO Director General. Even over the objection of the member state, the Director General communicated the text of the proposed amendments on 20 January 2022. So even if so what that's pretty much saying is once the country signs over its rights to the WHO, and if the WHO declares an emergency over anything, even the state that already handed over their rights can't object anymore to anything. So each country might be signing over their WHO for one specific thing. Maybe they're just trying to look out for other outbreaks in the future, right? But if there's anything else that falls underneath those articles that the country doesn't agree with, then you're shut out of luck, right? So there's nothing you can do about it because you already signed over the rights of your country. So let's say the United States signs over the rights for like actual health concerns in the future. We now have this like swine flu coming back, or bird flu, I think it was. I don't remember exactly which one. That's affecting cows now. That's the thing. Chicken pox and all these kinds of crazy things that are just popping up I wouldn't say out of nowhere, but are being allowed to be released in, like into the public. Say something else like COVID happens again. Now the WHO would have total control over issuing that kind of emergency. They can mandate that we take vaccines or whatever kind of experimental stuff that they're doing. And then let's just decide that they see like people up, starting to complain and actually push back. They can look at certain parts of the country and say, "Oh, well, these people that are complaining are from Texas, and what does Texas have? Texas has a lot of guns. So let's declare owning a weapon a public health emergency, and let's go ahead and take that as well." Well, the U.S. government can't do anything. That supersedes even the Constitution at that point. Local states can't do anything either. Like we signed over all the rights, so they can come in whenever they feel like it, issue whatever kind of emergency that they want, and we're screwed, right? So I believe we have until May. I'm not sure the exact date. I think it's like 12 or something like that. Is when they're taking a look at voting on this kind of thing. Now, I don't even believe it's a vote. I think that if countries don't neg- don't decline the action, they're just automatically swallowed up by this new like redo of all their rules and regulations. Like each country has to say like we don't want to be a part of it, so we don't want to be a part of this whole thing. Like we're out. They have to actually decline being a part of it before May, because if not, then they're just going to be swallowed up into it, and no response is going to be considered as a yes in this case. Um, there was a woman by the name of let me see Michelle Bachmann. She was a former congresswoman and current dean of Robertson School of Government at Regent University. She's been kind of leading the charge on this. This isn't something that I just kind of discovered or anything like that. I actually saw interviews with her, um, putting this information out and saying that we all need to be sending letters to like our congressmen and representatives. There's a link to a page on the website where they have like pre-written emails that you can like send out to your congressmen and women. I actually sent out to mine, so like to Ted Cruz and Ken Paxton and all them. So I sent out letters to all of them saying, and they actually responded. Like obviously, I didn't think that it was like a big deal, but they responded saying that this was something they already had on their plate, that they were looking at, and they're very concerned about. So that was very refreshing to know that they at least knew about it. Um, so that's great, but at least they kind of know what's going on. Yeah, we are supporting Texas. I definitely feel personally that Texas should secede. It's been too much. This whole thing with the border is kind of ridiculous. Not kind of, it's beyond ridiculous. As the Republic of Texas, each state should have their ability to protect their own citizens, right? And we obviously have the biggest border crossing in the co- entire country. Um, so we, as Texans, should have the ability to protect ourselves at the border. I was actually born and raised in El Paso, so that's a border city, right? And I talked to a lot of people that I know out there still, uh, and they said that it's a shit show. Like it's bad, real bad. Um, I always hear on the news that crime is down, and the only reason that they say crime is down is because they're not arresting people anymore, or if there's crime being done, it's not being reported, right? So that obviously, if you're not reporting crimes that are happening, then there's no crime. If you're not arresting anybody, then there's no crime to prosecute. So crime's down. But from a lot of people that I know and talk to, I have a lot of people in law enforcement as well that I still know. Like crime is up, big time. It's not reported in the news. They're not arrested, and even if they are arrested, they're let out. So it's getting bad. It's getting real bad. And who knows where all these people are coming from. There's reports of like terrorists that are coming from Iran. I think there was a new report saying that there's um, terrorists that were on like terror watch lists that are now coming over from Iran that are in the country. There was a report saying that there was supposed to be some kind of a major terrorist attack coming up in the next week and a half. Um, whether that's in Israel or that's here in the homeland, it's very concerning. I mean, one of the craziest things that I heard, and I've seen reports on it, not just the fact that all these people are coming over from who knows where and like who they are, but that Chinese nationals, right? I think this was talked about by uh, Professor Weinstein. If you guys ever heard of Professor Weinstein from the Dark Horse podcast, he has a great one. And he went on a trip with I think his son to South America, and they kind of walked up to the border, following all these migrants. He said that they were finding Chinese nationals that were like military age males that were not too happy when you kind of walked up to them and asked them where they're from and what they're doing. They were saying that they were keeping these nationals separate from the other groups that are coming up to the border. So like it's like China nationals kind of off to one side, and then everybody else like in a big group on this side. And that the Chinese foreign nationals were being helped like on the way. They were being given like housing and food, money, and whatever they needed, but they don't know like from who. Like they wouldn't talk about the organizations that they were working with and like who was helping them, how they were getting here a lot faster than everybody else was. Like they're being flown in, and they're like off to the side, like a secret. Like you would see them, but like they wouldn't talk to you. And if you tried to, they would get mad and be like, "We're not talking to you. We don't want to say anything." They're bringing in my opinion, Chinese military men into the country, providing them aid, supplies, money, whatever they need. Um, and I think we're being invaded for a reason to be toppled from within. Obviously, the US would never be able to be invaded. It would all have to happen from within, right? So, terrorists from Iran, military members from China are all like in the country already. You see pushes to get rid of law enforcement. Minimum wage is being increased. A lot of companies are firing U.S. citizens, even green card holders. What was the name of that company that fired like 30,000 American citizens, and now they're going to try hiring illegals? I forgot the name of that company. I think it was Tyson Foods or something like that. So like, I really do think that it's being done on purpose. They're trying to get rid of American citizens, bring in all these other people from other countries to do the jobs that American citizens don't want to do or don't are not able to do anymore, and bring in these illegals to work them because they are going to be happy with whatever kind of payment that you give them. You're not going to. A lot of companies are not going to want to pay or even give raises to a lot of people that they've had working there for years and years. Right? They rather just get rid of them, bring in illegals that they can pay cheaper wages to, and then turn a profit. This whole thing about raising minimum wage is I get it, right? People want to have to live and all that kind of stuff. But if you're working in a fast food restaurants and stuff like that, that's not a long term kind of deal. Like those kind of things that you're working at like at a fast food restaurant or McDonald's and all that kind of stuff, those jobs are for like high school students, man. Like you're looking to make some quick money while you're, 15, 16, no, 16, 17, 18 years old. Like you work at McDonald's, right? You work all through high school. And then when you get out of high school, you go to college, you level up, all that kind of stuff. But these people that are trying to put in 15, 20 years at McDonald's and expecting raises like you're working at a corporation, like you're working like a freaking corporate job, it's just not going to work. It's just not how it's supposed to work. California, they raised the minimum wage to $20, which is great, right? But then you had a whole bunch of people go into work the next day. They were either fired or they were converted to part time and given less hours. I mean, the company does not want to pay more. They're going to have to offset those prices somehow. Either they pass it on to the consumer, which is us. So McDonald's, a Big Mac meal is going to be like $15 to $16, or they try and keep the price somewhat close to what it was previously, and they just lower your hours or they convert you to part time, so they don't have to pay you as much. And there's a lot of McDonald's around the country as well that are automated as well. So like, there's nobody working in there, just a bunch of robots flipping burgers. You know, so that's pretty much where it's going to end up going. Like, yeah, all these companies have no problem. Like they'll raise the minimum wage. That's fine because they're going to make more money anyways. They're going to charge more for their products, and they're going to get rid of the people working there. You know, they convert them over to part time, or they just give them less hours, or they just fire most of them, and they have like one or two. They would rather pay one person twice as much, like twice their salary, than have a whole bunch of people, drinking, working there, making a lot of money, whatever. Like they just rather pay one person that makes maybe like a few extra bucks here and there than have to like provide everybody a $20 minimum wage. That's ridiculous. So it's getting crazy. It's getting real crazy. I don't know, but this whole thing with the WHO, like it leads up to all that kind of stuff. So I'll just kind of go over the basics of what they're trying to do, maybe the top five or so. Um, so they're looking to amend 13 articles within it, and I'll have the list to all the articles. You guys can read through them. They're looking to expand on them a little bit more. So top five. Number one is increased surveillance. Under Article 5, the WHO will develop early warning criteria that will allow it to establish a risk assessment for a member state, which means that it can use the type of modeling, simulation, and predictions that exaggerated the risk from COVID 19 over 2 years ago. Once the WHO creates its assessment, it will communicate it to intergovernmental organizations and other member states. So, kind of like what was that movie with Tom Cruise when he was a cop, but they can kind of like predict crime before it happened? I forgot the name of that movie too. Um, the Minority Report. There you go. So they look at like models and simulations of what was happening like in a certain city or certain area, and they can kind of try and predict crime. And they say like, oh, on this day during the summer around this time, and when these kind of conditions are in place, we can predict that certain amounts of like theft happen within this certain area of the city and blah blah blah. So they can just go in and like arrest people ahead of time. Right. So that's great. Number two, 48-hour deadline. Under Articles 6, 10, 11, and 13, a member state is given 48 hours to respond to a WHO risk assessment and accept or reject on site assistance. However, in practice, this timeline can be reduced to hours, forcing it to comply or face international disapproval led by the WHO and potentially unfriendly member states. It's kind of like a Chinese, um, what do you call it? So if they send out a risk assessment. They send out an emergency plan and be like, "Oh, this is emergency and this is what we want to do." If the state approves it, then they'll come in and implement whatever they want to do. But if the country pushes back and say, "No, we don't want to take such heavy-handed, uh, ways of doing stuff during this emergency," the WHO can just override you, and they'll come in and do whatever they want, and then they'll shame you on the national level, on the international level. They'll say, the US wasn't on board with this and they don't care about health and they're not doing their part and all that kind of stuff. So, that's the other part. Number three would be secret sources. Under Article 9, the WHO can rely on undisclosed sources for information, leading it to declare a public health emergency. Uh, those sources could include big pharma, WHO funders such as Gates Foundation and Gates founded and funded Gavi Alliance, as well as others seeking to monopolize power. So they don't even have to be part of the government. They could just be like secret sources to say like, there's something going on with like the farming aspect of the country, and the WHO thinks it's an emergency, but the government doesn't want to give them like approval to come in. They could just say, oh well, we got a study from so and so source. They don't even have to tell you like who it's from. So we're just gonna come in and actually do what we have to do because it's like a big emergency. So it doesn't have to come from any kind of legitimate source. I always seem to struggle with where Bill Gates got his medical degree from. That guy pops up all the time when it comes to like vaccines and any kind of health emergencies. He's like front and center with his organizations and his foundations. Like, when did he get a freaking medical degree? I don't understand. The dude has all kinds of opinions when it comes to everything that has to do with like medical emergencies and stuff. And that dude's not even a doctor. Like, what the hell is like what the hell is he doing in the middle of all this? Um, Number four, weekend sovereignty. Under Article 12, when the WHO receives undisclosed information concerning a purported public health threat in a member state, the Director General may what not must may but not must consult with the WHO Emergency Committee and the member state. However, he or she can unilaterally declare a potential or actual public health emergency of international concern. The Director General's authority replaces national sovereign authority. There you go. This can later be used to enforce sanctions on nations. So yeah, the Director General's authority replaces national sovereign authority. So, like I said, the WHO, whoever's in charge of the WHO, I think it's like Tedros. I forgot his last name, but that dude just be like, no, it's an emergency, and I'm overruling anything you have to say. So, when it comes to the U.S., um, that means overriding our Constitution. And despite what anybody says, we are not a democracy here. The United States is a constitutional republic, and we do believe in the Constitution. Well, at least most of us do. I would like to think. So they could just override that if he feels like it. There's nothing that we can do about it. Uh, Number five, rejecting the amendments under Article 59. After the amendments are adopted by the World Health Assembly, a member state has 6 months to reject them. This means November this year. If the member state fails to act, it will be deemed to have accepted the amendments in full. Any rejection or reservation received by the Director General after the expiry of that period shall have no force and effect. So there's time limits to when we can actually push back. So I don't know. It's wild. Yeah, I don't know. There's like a whole lot of. I was reading through all of it. There's 20 of them that they're reporting. Those are the top five, but there's another 15 that are pretty wild too. You have to kind of read through them to understand them in full. But I mean, why would we even think about handing over our sovereignty over to a corrupt organization like the WHO? I don't see any purpose for the WHO. They're just like um, what's the other organization? The one that we have, the UN. They're completely useless as well. The UN was put up, during for World War II around that time and afterwards, but now they're just completely useless. They just funnel money and just waste taxpayer dollars on every turn. So it's gonna be a great year. It's gonna be, elections are it's election season now. So um these elections, not like I mentioned, not just for the US, there's gonna be elections held all over the world for a lot of different countries. I think the last I checked was like 15 or 16 different countries have elections this year. So there's a lot in play. Obviously, Argentina was a great one there. I think I read somewhere that they got the budget back down to um, not in the red as well, like anymore. They're actually level, so there's no like national debt, and they're just doing great. And that's because the new president, Milei, was just like getting rid of organizations that have absolutely no use within the government. So the answer is always less government, not more government. And I don't re- I don't depend on the government to do anything that affects my life. They should just be at a basic level, just enough to run the country and keep us upright, protecting the borders and all that kind of stuff. And that's it. Everything else should be left to the states and to individuals. And then we go from there. So, I mean, we'll see how that goes. So, and like I mentioned before, when it came to like congressmen and for people to reach out to their congressmen and stuff like that, and the U.S. senators, It's very important. So there is legislation as well that was put up by Rick Scott out of Florida. Um, he actually has some legislation they're wanting to put up for a vote as well. So this came out on May 26th, a couple years ago. So it's been going on for a while, but I think there's a few updated ones from other senators around the country as well. Uh, so I'll just kind of go to the basic one here. Um, says Senator Rick Scott introduced a bill to ensure that the World Health Organization cannot unilaterally impose public health restrictions on the United States and violate America's national sovereignty. The legislation comes as the World Health Assembly meets to consider a pandemic treaty that would aim to direct the public health decisions of US states and localities, giving unprecedented power to the World Health Organization. Uh, and there's a quote from Senator Scott that said, "The WHO's radical pandemic treaty is a dangerous globalist overreach. The United States of America must never give more power to the WHO. The WHO is a puppet for Xi Jinping," which is true. Him and Tedros are like best friends. That's where he got his training from. Uh, that's his daddy. Controlled by the Chinese Communist Party and helped Beijing cover up the origins of COVID. We must quickly pass this bill to ensure that public health matters in the country remain in the hands of Americans, not globalist puppets working for communist China. Uh, yeah, so it's imperative. So these were kind of like this started like in 2022, right? This whole thing kind of started. It's kind of been pushed down the line. They've been kind of kicking the can down the line much as they can, fighting back, fighting back, fighting back. But this year in May is like the final one. Like it's like in the final votes, and if the U.S. doesn't pull out of it, like we're going to be sucked in, and who knows what's going to happen. So I'll add the link to the sites down below. There is some information concerning um, campaigns that are up and running currently. Like I said, there's email templates that you can send out to your senators and your congressmen and women um, for them to, you can kind of push it on them as well so they can bring it up for a vote and stuff like that. So I'll have that all linked down below as well for everybody. Uh, so everybody can go ahead and take a look at that. It's very concerning. As soon as I heard that a while back, I think I first heard it in at the end of last year, I think. If you guys are watch Dr. Drew at all, he had the Congresswoman on. So if you're looking for a little more information on that and how she kind of goes through it, look for Michelle Bachmann, Bachmann, on the Dr. Drew show, and she breaks it down exactly what's up for grabs and how much time we have left to push back on it, and kind of everything that's in place. So those are great listens. She's been on multiple times, so that's what's going on. The last one topic that I have, and I'll kind of push through it here because I don't want to take up too much of you guys' Saturday, would be this whole thing that happened with P. Diddy. I'm sure you guys know that he's been all over the news. March 25th, right? Homeland Security and local law enforcement raided P. Diddy Combs' Los Angeles and Miami homes as part of an ongoing sex trafficking investigation. This is how I know that they're pushing distractions pretty hard. So any event that we discuss kind of throughout this show and on their own would be like a big deal, right? But when they throw all of these instances out at the same time and all at once, like the R. Kelly stuff was a big thing, Epstein was a big thing, Ghislaine Maxwell trial was a big thing. So what's the next distraction? Like here comes P. Diddy, right? Now, his homes were raided, LA and Miami, but in my personal opinion, his homes were not raided to arrest him or expose anything that was going on. They were raided to find the evidence because one of P. Diddy's security members said that P. Diddy had all of his homes bugged and with cameras in the rooms set up to record everything at all times, 24/7. If he had people in there that he was trying to compromise, other celebrities, artists, rappers, singers, I'm sure he was friends with a lot of politicians, you know, governors, senators, Obama, all that kind of stuff, right? So if this was the US version of Epstein, uh, he had a lot of information on a lot of very important people that he was recording and bugging. My personal opinion, they didn't raid his houses to arrest him, or bring anybody to justice. They were just raiding his homes to get all of that evidence and make it go away. I don't have any information coming from anybody on that. Um, that's just personally what I feel is going to happen. Epstein went to jail and died. Ghislaine Maxwell is spending pretty much the rest of her life in jail. But for what? I know she was charged with like sex trafficking and all that kind of stuff, but to who? Like, she went to jail and there was a trial. She got, you know, all those charges were put on her and she was convicted of all of them, right? But to who? Like, nobody's ever been exposed. There's nobody else has been arrested. There's no other people that have been put in jail for buying sex trafficking. So how are you convicted of sex trafficking when you, like, to nobody? You know what I mean? Like, they never said like who she trafficked to, or like who was buying these girls, or like underage girls and stuff. But like, who to who, right? So it's the same thing that's gonna happen when with the whole Diddy thing. Like, he has allegations against him, and I'm not gonna say that that it's true or not. It's just alleged, right? All this is just alleged. But like, to who though? Like, who does he have? Like, who's there, right? They're not gonna like raid his homes and just arrest everybody. It's just another one of those things. It's like, who are you selling to? Like, who do you have on camera? They're not gonna say anything. So, in my personal opinion, they didn't raid his homes to arrest anybody or any of that kind of stuff. It was just to hide the evidence. So I think they arrested his kids or whoever was in the house, stuff like that. But he didn't seem too much, to care. I don't see him all over the news, like, or been arrested or brought in for questioning. I don't see his record deals or what companies that he was doing business with haven't dropped him. There hasn't been any kind of like, from any kind of the businesses that he has or things that he had going on. Like, nobody's dropped him for anything. He still has all his affiliations and contracts that he had going on, and sponsorships and all that stuff. Nobody's dropped him for anything. He still has all that stuff, right? When Kanye West had his little, kind of meltdown, Adidas dropped him in a heartbeat. Like, the next day, he was done. Like, $1 billion contract, he was just gone, right? So when they can't control you, they fear you and they try to destroy you. But when you're controlled, you're controlled. You get brought up on all these allegations, but then you like land comfortably in a safe spot and you continue to do business, right? So it's always important to remember, when you're not controlled, they destroy you. But when you are controlled, you're controlled and everything's going to be fine. So I don't know. I don't have too much information as far as what's going on with the latest of that stuff, but I'll be keeping an eye on out for that because it's extremely important. I don't see a lot of stuff, like stuff online and stuff. I don't really pay too much attention to that, but uh, I have a lot of FOIA requests and just requests for information coming out. So waiting on documentation just to kind of read and try and make heads or tails of what's going on. But for the most part, it's just business as usual, I think. So we'll see. It's sad that nobody really pays too much attention or cares about the allegations, right? So we all know it's sex trafficking. Obviously, that could be a lot of different things. Sex trafficking would imply, like, at first thought, at first glance, that would imply like overage girls. Now we all know that might not be the case. Yeah, if R. Kelly and P. Diddy were like real cool friends, and R. Kelly went down for underage stuff. I'm sure a lot of what's being alleged is the same thing in this case, but why isn't it more of an outrage? I don't understand. Like, these are kids that we're talking about, people taking advantage, and everybody, it comes out in the news, and everybody makes kind of a big stink about it online, like, "Oh, it's ridiculous and it's disgusting, like little kids," but then like nothing happens, right? The entire world should be like crashing down on people that mess with kids. If you look at videos online from other countries that say like India, I see a lot of them. In Africa, there's a lot of it as well. When it comes to people messing with kids, and you always see like these groups of people finding the pedophile. There, I think it was in Mexico. The last one I saw, some dude got arrested for allegedly messing with an underage kid, and as the cops were arresting him, like the entire neighborhood found out what was going on, and the entire neighborhood like got together in a big group and like beat the shit out of that guy. Uh, as the cops were arresting him, they were trying to like get him to safety. They finally arrested him. They put him in the back of the truck, and he was sitting in the back of the truck, and they like dragged him out of the truck, and they started whooping his ass even more. And the cops just drove off because they were like, "Yeah, we're not going to deal with this, this kind of stuff, right?" Like, that's the kind of stuff that should be happening. I don't condone like vigilante justice for the most part, but there's a few things that I do support it like 100%. Anything that has to do with children, pedophilia, or like us, like abusing kids, whether it be physically or mentally, all that kind of stuff. Like that kind of stuff, I let it slide. Like, I'll turn another, like a freaking blind eye to that kind of stuff. Like, we should be dragging these people out into the streets, whooping the shit out of them when they mess with kids like that. I'm not sorry on any level. Uh, and if we wouldn't be getting arrested for that kind of stuff, I think that it'd be happening a lot more here. Um, I think here, like in Texas, it'd be understandable to a lot of judges, depending on where you live within the state. I think I've heard of a few stories of dads whooping the shit out of like dudes that were abusing their daughters, like raping them and stuff, and the judge just lets them go, right? So it just kind of depends. It depends where you are and like what the circumstances were, but it should be acceptable on all levels, in my opinion. So that's just me. So don't listen to what I say. Be a better person than I am. Um, yeah. So all right, guys, as we kind of wind down here, I won't take up too much more of your Saturday evening. I know a lot of people got a lot more important things to do than be sitting here with me. So I appreciate everybody's time today. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. I'll have all the links to everything that I was discussing here today, especially the stuff about the WHO. It's very important that you guys send out emails and letters to your representatives. Force them to take a look at this kind of stuff because it's coming up soon and here in May. Uh, and we need more exposure on this kind of stuff. So stopthewho.org. I'll have it listed in the show notes as well as links to all the templates and like campaign stuff that they have going on. Check out the link to the podcast with Michelle Bachman as well. I'll have that listed so you guys can just get right to it. So um, I appreciate everybody. Let's see what's going on. Hopefully nothing too serious happens on Monday with the eclipse. Um, Links to the rocket fire as well will be in the show notes later. I'll update all that kind of stuff. So this episode is not going to be coming down. I'm just going to go ahead and leave it the way it is. I usually download them and like edit them and re-upload them again, but it's Saturday. We'll just let it slide, and I'll come back with another one next week for you guys. Um, I will be posting everything else on the rest of our social media. So if you guys want to catch us, You can find us on Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, as well as iHeartRadio and Amazon Music at Truth Defender Podcast. Shoot us an email at thetruthDefender1776 at gmail.com. Links to all social media down below. Both our Instagram accounts. I'll have to update the other one. Twitter, GETTR, Facebook, Rumble. Check us out as well. So I appreciate everybody's time. Thanks for stopping in today. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you were here with me, and I appreciate it. Everybody, stay safe out there. Stay blessed. Most of all, stay frosty. Adios, folks.
Perfect.